Today, I want to do the second part of what I began last time. The last time I preached, I spoke about being just and bringing justice. And it was a bit more of a theology around what God has done to inaugurate that justice through Jesus. And we're speaking about five powerful attributes, or five attributes that make us as the church powerful. And we've spoken about being holy and being charismatic and being contemplative, and now we're talking about being just and bringing justice, and there's one more to go, which we'll do next week. But if we look at this, the prophet says, this is Prophet Amos chapter 5, it's a very powerful chapter, all about justice and injustice. And then he says this, let justice roll on like a river, and righteousness like a never failing stream. That's the heart of God. Let justice roll on like a river, and righteousness like a never failing stream. Sometimes, however, we feel like it's not like that river cascading and just ongoing where there's a catchment area and it just keeps flowing and flowing and flowing and servicing multitudes of people. Sometimes that river can tend to dry up, and justice isn't flowing like a river anymore into a world that is gripped with injustice. So, what I want to share with you today, I feel quite vulnerable. I feel quite weak when I talk about this subject. I don't stand here with confidence. I stand here like one of us, going, God, let justice flow like a river, not like a trickle. So it can be a trickle, or it can be a river, through my life and through yours. Yesterday afternoon, I finished going over this. It was about 5 o'clock. I went and sat in the lounge, got myself something to drink, sat down there, turned on the TV, a little bit of Six Nations rugby, a little bit of Man United, and back to Six Nations rugby. Not that I'm a Man United that was just honk soccer. I went back to the rugby, but I was feeling uneasy because all I could think of was what's going on in the Ukraine. That's what I could think of. I just thought of people saying goodbye to their families to go and fight. Some of them haven't shot a weapon. And they've got to go and fight. And it's just like, what did they do to deserve that? What is that brother, father, grandfather, son, what did they do to have to go and fight now and die? It's unjust. And so I got up after 10 minutes of watching, because I couldn't watch anymore. And I went outside and I sat outside. But sometimes we feel, what can I do? But what can I do? I feel helpless in a world of injustice. But I want to remind you of this truth. What I shared last night is a brief recap. God, when He sent Jesus to make things right at the highest level, at the level where it cannot be undone. So on that cross, when He died, He made right our relationship with God by paying for all of our sins and rebellion and washing us clean. And whoever believes enters into that truth and that reality. But He did it for all. And secondly, He didn't just remove sin, He dealt with the force of evil and the source of evil in terms of Satan, the arch enemy of God, who comes to deceive, by triumphing over him in the cross, sealed forever. It cannot be undone. Satan's fate is settled. And He inaugurated the beginning of the last days, which will be fulfilled at the Parousia when He returns. And God makes all things new and all things completely right. And that's what we as Christians look forward to. I'm back. So, what does a life of justice look like? What does a child of God whose heart understands grace and in some ways able to connect that grace with the people around them so that justice flows like a river and not like a trickle? As I spoke about last time, if you have money, power, status today, it is due to the century and place in which you were born. And to talents and capacities and health, none of which you really earned. It's by grace. Secondly, I said there is an inequitable distribution of both goods and opportunities in this world. Therefore, if you have been assigned the goods of this world by God and you don't share them with others, it's not just stinginess, it's injustice, as Tim Keller said. So let's start with Jesus, because he is the image of God on earth. In other words, if you want to know what God's heart is like, you just got to look at Jesus. And so let's think about what he did with people around him when he interacted with them. I always think of that woman caught in adultery. It's one of the first places I go, because here's a woman who did something wrong. And the way Jesus speaks with her is he makes things right, because that's what justice is. Justice is making right what's wrong. And so what he does with her is, and first of all, how unjust is society? Where's the guy who committed adultery? He's scot-free. That's unjust. There's two of them. But the woman gets dragged by the religious zealots, and they want to stone her because the law says if a woman commits adultery, she must be stoned. That's not fair. So what does Jesus do? He brings justice. How does he bring justice? He speaks to her personally and says, you don't do that again. There's a better way to live. And then he says, to you, who are accusing her, wanting to kill her, he says, to you, I wouldn't if I were you. And they leave, because they know they themselves are guilty of things. But he brings justice to people who even weren't innocent. You see what I'm saying? The heart of God is to flow like a river, to lift up where things have happened. Now look, yes, she'd done something wrong, but did she deserve to be stoned for that? No. Jesus' heart isn't for that vengeance. And then it doesn't matter who he met. He tended to just release this, let me make it right, even though you've done wrong. Let me show you what grace looks like. And this is what a river rolling through Christians' lives should look like. Our lives should look more like Jesus on planet Earth. We're called to represent him, to do what he did, because he's gone to the Father. And so there's this desire in the heart of God, let righteousness be a never-ending stream through us, and justice flow like a river into society. We should not, church, be adding any injustice to the world. Instead, we should be doing what Jesus did and trying to make right what's wrong. So right at the start, I want to say this. We're going to look at how it practically works out. But I may say some things that are very challenging, and I may not, because I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. I've got my notes here, but I might deviate. But I just want you to know, I am one of us. I sit here, stand here vulnerably, and I go, God, let justice flow like a river through my life, not like a trickle. So there is what Nicholas Wolterstorff called the Quartet of the Vulnerable. The quartet meaning four groupings of people that throughout the scriptures are highlighted, especially, in fact, right from the very beginning. They are the widow, the orphan, the resident alien, the stranger, the person who wasn't born here but has ended up living here, a resident, like a refugee, and the poor. Those four you will find throughout the scriptures keep popping up. Amos 5, Jeremiah, they're all over the place. The Psalms, they're just everywhere. Those four. Those four are everywhere around us. Everywhere. The widow. Suddenly, their security, their companionship, maybe their financial future, their confidence is gone. And they're alone. It works both ways, for the widower and the widow, but suddenly they're alone. And the world is a harsh place to try and handle alone. Who will be there for them? The orphan. Gosh, that's a no-brainer. I don't even have to explain that. Imagine parents suddenly ripped from your life when you're small. Got to go and live somewhere else with some people, even if they're family, you've never lived with them before. And your world's turned upside down. Who will be there for them? The resident alien or the refugee, who never feels quite like they belong, who's trying to adapt to this different culture, who never feels quite accepted, who doesn't always have the same opportunities that the other people who are born there have, who came often because life from whence they came was untenable, who came looking for greener pastures. And we get upset sometimes that other people come to look for greener pastures here, but look at all the South Africans heading for greener pastures. Who's going to be there for them who feel unsettled, insecure, and a bit vulnerable in a society where they're not quite celebrated? And then the poor. Though we argue that some of them are where they are because of what they did, our arrogance and our ignorance betray us. We prefer to keep the poor away from our world, prefer not to look a beggar in the eye. We don't want to engage somebody who's been rummaging through a dustbin, eating discarded food. We don't really like smelly, but we also don't want to sit and hear why. So while I was preparing this, on Thursday morning, I wrote a little poem. Loving the lovely, ignoring the lowly, we move, embracing some and shunning others. We search Google for the lovely. We feel special amongst the lovely. We try to look lovely. We seek not the lowly, but we turn our eyes away from them at robots and parking lots, lots and lots of turning away. We seek and see the lovely, but not the lowly. For the lowly eyes see inside us, revealing what we don't fully know. Better not to know and feel less, and so we turn away. Imagine a different world where the lowly were sought out and the lovely ignored. Imagine lovely people at robots and lowly people stopping. Would they too look away like the lovely do from the lowly? Or would the lowly look into the eyes of the lovely and feel something of their new plight, their pain and lack and their vulnerability? But that is not our world. One question I must answer: will I conform, or will I seek a better world? A more lovely world where the lowly are as valuable as the lovely. So consider South Africa, our beloved land. Church, please do not tell me everybody got what they deserved. The fact is, it was unfair, and it is still unfair for the majority. But do I care? Does Jesus care? Does a new creation with a new heart and the very Spirit of God go, let justice roll on like a river and righteousness like a never-ending stream? Sometimes we don't care because we don't know what to do. Sometimes we feel so helpless that we feel indifferent. And the worst is, we can get to a place where we give up. And it becomes a trickle. Remember this picture? It becomes a trickle. When you give up, that river stops flowing, it becomes a trickle. God, there's a beautiful word in the scriptures called shalom. It's a magnificent word. And God wants shalom for you. And He wants shalom for your neighbor. And He wants shalom for the world. And that's why Jesus came, to offer people a shalom. Now that word is a beautiful word. And it pretty much means, amongst a whole lot of other things, peace, harmony, wholeness, completeness, prosperity. That it goes well with you. That's shalom. And God doesn't just want it for you and for me, He wants it for us. He wants it for communities because the world is His and everything in it. So, what do we do? Number one, if you want justice to flow like a river, quit feeling guilty. Stop feeling guilty. Don't feel guilty. I don't feel guilty for what I have. Because you know what guilt does? Guilt is not of the kingdom of God. Guilt has no place in the heart of God. Jesus came to remove the guilt of mankind. He lifts guilt. He lifts shame. It is a bad motivation, guilt. In fact, when people try and do good to the poor out of guilt, they often do it with arrogance and in a condescending way, without love, and that kind of helping sometimes hurts. Like some people have written books. When helping hurts, there's a way to do it that's the heart of God, and there's a way to do it that's out of guilt. And one of them is a motivation of love, and one of them is a motivation of guilt. And only love brings true shalom. So number one, don't feel guilty. So what do you do if you're feeling guilty? You go back to that cross and you go, God, I receive grace upon grace. I can't undo, but I receive grace upon grace now, and I refuse. You know who wants to make you feel guilty? Is the devil. He's the condemner. So don't feel guilty. Number two, what should I do? Remember this, you cannot do everything. You can't solve the problem of the poor. If the world government says, we are going to eradicate, that's what they say. When I say world government, they all come together, all the powerful nations, we're going to eradicate poverty by 2050. They'll never do that. You know what Jesus said? You will always have the poor. Why? Because the heart of man is selfish. So you're always going to have the poor. You can't eradicate poverty. I can't do everything, but I can do something. Let justice flow like a river. The same Spirit of God is like a river inside of us, isn't it? Let it flow like a river. Tim Keller said the following: having the resources and the ability to do something, but not doing it, is hiding the beauty of God's heart from the hurting world. So when I do something, you know what I'm doing? Just something. When I'm doing something, I'm just showing the world, a hurting world, something of the heart of God who wants to make right what's wrong. Just something small. Every one of us can do something in love. Why? Because we've received grace. You see, Tim Keller went on to say in his book, Generous Justice, he says, we are called to go to places where the fabric of shalom has broken down, where the weaker members of societies are falling through the fabric, and repair it and remind them there is a God who's made all things right, and I'm just here in some way to show you something that looks right when a lot has been done wrong. And then thirdly, what can we do? We can begin at home and in our workplace. That's where you start. Or your class at school, or your varsity lecture, or your sports. You start where you are. That's where you start. Like right now, I can do nothing in the Ukraine but pray. Nothing but pray. Right now, as I stand here. But where I live is my home and the work environment, and that's where I can start. So that's where we start. How can justice flow like a river and righteousness like a never-ending stream through me in that place? So let's consider the workplace. When the culture of our work environment is to dehumanize or exploit or dishonor people, will you just go with the status quo, or will you go let justice flow like a river? So when you see somebody who is dishonored or dehumanized or exploited in your workplace, what will we do? Now let me say the following. There is a way to do something, and there is a way not to do something. So ask God, what can I do to let justice flow like a river towards this person or these people? And then speak to somebody who's wise and ask them, I feel God's wanting me to do this. What do you think? And then go with it. We're available to help. We don't always know, but we can guide. But I want to say we don't just accept the status quo of injustice as children of God. Jesus didn't do that. And we are his disciples. We are his followers. We are called to let this river flow of justice. When our work culture is willing to compromise the well-being of people or the environment in order to make the buck, in order to pursue the bottom line, are we just going to let it happen? Or are we going to find a way to let justice flow like a river? There's a way to do it, and again I said there's a way not to do it. At home, and it comes down to smaller things. Now, there always are limitations to what we can do. And we can only do certain things within those limitations and those parameters. But let us not conform to the status quo of a fallen, unjust world. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is this. And I've heard there are some big corporates who pay their bottom line staff so well because they will not conform to what the rest of the world does. They're not even a Christian organization. They're letting justice flow. I heard a stat this week. It was remarkable. I thought, wow, that's an amazing thing to do from a big company like that. I can't believe it. But it's a fact, they do. So I go, God, if the world says the going rate is that, will I settle for the going rate, the lowest possible that I can get away with? Or will we go, let justice flow? Because you see, sometimes when justice flows, justice is meant to make right what's wrong. It's not meant to just scratch an itch. It's meant to change the future. So in other words, when justice flows like a river, it should be bringing liberty from a cycle of poverty or a cycle of abuse or a cycle. It should be bringing liberty from it and not just sustainment in it. So that's true justice. Like a river, it liberates. And Jesus said these haunting words. Matthew 25. This is about the sheep and the goats and that whole parable. It says, and then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did it to me. Many Christians are happy for the church as an organization to do the justice. No, no, no. God anoints us all, wherever we are, to be like a river of justice flowing out of my heart towards others around me. The church has been made just by God and now practices justice. Justice is an outworking of what's happened inside the heart. That's what it is. If I've received grace, let grace flow through me. If I've been justified, let justice flow through me. If I've been made righteous, then let me do right to you and right to those around me. That's the heart. It flows from here. It's not a dead work. It's a flow from a reality of a transformed life inside. It's more of a way of life, flowing from a grace-drenched heart and grace-filled eyes that see people more the way God sees them. Okay, now here is a quote that in my studies I came across, and we live obviously in South Africa is this mixture of largely third world with a bit of first world, and so this is going to be looking at life from a Westerner's point of view, the Western world. Listen to this. This much I know. The imagined world of privilege and disparity is treasured by all of us who live in the advantaged West. It is treasured more by men than by women, more by whites than by blacks, but all of us in the West have enormous advantage. The loss of that world, it follows, is enormously frightening and disturbing, turning to us all, if we notice or think about it. Our fear invites us to gestures of nostalgia, and it reduces us to acts of brutality. Walter Brueggemann said that. See, the world is changing. Remember those days in South Africa of the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s? They're gone. They're forever gone. And what we find is those who were used to this Western way of living, that more kind of colonial way that advantages whites over blacks and other races, as you feel that world going away, it stirs within you. There's a great loss, and you're panicking, and it stirs within you either you just go back to these feelings of nostalgia, remembering how good it was, or to acts of brutality, which is often a lack of a flow of justice from your heart. When you don't allow justice to flow like a river, it's an act of brutality. Because you're going, I don't care about you and your story. And Jesus, he cared for the least. He cared for the poor. He cared for the widow. He cared for the orphan. He cared for the resident, alien, or stranger. So I close with practical ways of doing things. So in this church, so what I'm trying to say is this. All of us, every one of us, watching online at home or here, we who carry the heart of God, who are Christians, who follow Christ, who have been born again, who have the Spirit of God within us, who have received grace upon grace, we can let justice flow like a river because of what we've received and look for an opportunity. I can't do everything. By the way, let me just tell you this. I don't give out a lot of money to people at robots. Okay? And even when I engage people, I don't just give money. I prefer to do other things to help them. But the engagement is good. The looking in somebody's eyes. I don't want to look in their eyes sometimes only because I feel guilty that I can't give them something. I was walking on the promenade the other day, or not the promenade in Schlonga, but the road by Glen Ashley. And this guy says to me, he says, hey, have you got something for me? So I said to him, actually, I've only got my phone on me. I don't have any money on me. So he said to me, okay, today you can give me a little bit of love. Tomorrow you can give me something. So I said to him, so what's better, love or money? Now, I wasn't being difficult, and he laughed because he understood what I was saying. But when you're hungry, love is food. So, but I'm just trying to say, I'm not living this life where I just give money out to everybody. It's not what I do. But I want to engage. I want to look in eyes. I want to give value to people, no matter what their story is. So we can each do that individually, and then together we can do more. Do you know that? You know that together you can do more? If, for example, I've got 100 rand, what can I do with 100 rand? Not much to change the situation. But if 500 people put 100 rand together, you can do a whole lot to change the reality of a certain situation. So I understand together we are better. That's why we have organizations and foundations and things who gather the togetherness to make a bigger difference. But that does not exclude me from my individual. Let justice flow like a river in my home. Let justice flow like a river in my workplace. Let justice flow like a river. You know what I'm saying? It's both and, always. So, with us here at Emmanuel, finally we have all the documentation. So our NPO, called Fingerprints of Love, is fully up and running and fully functioning now. And we are looking to actually employ somebody for a few hours a week to do the administration of it. Because in 2015, we did an amazing work helping with a school. About $750,000 rands worth of work was put in, and it was amazing. We transformed the school. And we've got a creche, and we've done quite a few other things. But now's the time for this Fingerprints of Love to start to fly. So we are at a meeting yesterday with Mark Rivet Hall, and we are going to run with this thing properly this year. Our first project is we're about to put at Sibonga Nhlantla Primary School in Waterloo. They don't have a library or a reading room. Why? Because it's full of clutter. It's full of desks and books. No, not books to read, but just like stuff for the school, because they don't have a storeroom. So what we said is, let's liberate that room so that the kids can learn to read, because they've got to learn to read English. If they don't have extra time to learn to do English, it's going to disadvantage them in their future. So let's liberate that room so that they can learn English and they can read and go to the library, and let's build either a storeroom, or let's get a container. Let's buy a container, put a container there, and put all the stuff in there so the little kids can learn, because right now they haven't got access to that room. So that's the first project we're going to do, and we'll let you know about it. But we plan. So what I want to say is this: Fingerprints of Love is operational. We do work 100% amongst the disadvantaged people. We want to help people, prepare them for life, education. We want to help skill people. We want to beautify the place. So we're going to do cleanups. I'll tell you all about another time. What we're looking to do is we're going to employ some people who don't have jobs, X amount of times a month, to go and clean up the beach with all the plastic. From Fingerprints of Love, we're going to pay those people. They get an income, and we beautify our city, because rubbish clutters and makes our city bad. And it destroys the sea life, and it destroys everything. So we're going to help. So Fingerprints of Love is here to uplift and make beautiful and give value and dignity and a hope and a future to people. What's good is all donations, you get a Section 18A certificate for it. Whether you give every month or whether you give to a big project, you can use that thing to claim it back from the tax thing, which a lot of people do. Businesses have to do it. Secondly, besides Fingerprints of Love, we have our Ray of Hope Babies Home. I'm talking about justice. I'm talking about doing right what's wrong. So I'll close with this one. In 2009, it is wrong, we felt, that some children are abandoned at a police station, in a hospital, or in a rubbish bin with no hope in a future. It is wrong. What can we do to make it right? We can do something. So we bought a home in Glen Hills. And Ray of Hope Babies Home has been running since 2009. We employ staff, a house mother. We maintain the home by the grace of God, just through donations. And again, Section 18A certificates are there. Why? We want to make right what's wrong in this world. We can't do everything, but we can do something. Those who've received grace, those who've been justified, let justice flow like a river. You know what grace means? I don't treat you exactly like you deserve. I treat you because of who I am and what I have a revelation of. And when justice flows because of grace and because of love, it's very powerful.